Hey everybody, this is Zach from Fish Talk Magazine. Thanks for tuning in for another edition of Live with Lenny. It's good to be back. I can't believe it's been a month. Tonight we'll be discussing how to capitalize on the fall peanut bunker migration and targeting striped bass. So before we get into things, I just want to mention everything to everybody. It's the 1 year anniversary of the passing of Jeff Ewenson. He was a near and dear friend of ours. He was the husband of Fish Talk's publisher, Mary Ewenson. We lost him 1 year ago today. And to honor Jeff, we now have an incredible foundation called the Youth Spirit Foundation. It's a 501(c) and supports various community programs in the Mid-Atlantic and in Newport. So just wanted to share that with you all. If you want to take a look at youthspirit.org, you can learn more about how we're carrying on the spirit of Jeff and his memory. All right. So with that, I'd like to bring on our angler-in-chief, Lenny Rudo.
Hey, what's up, Zach?
How you doing?
I've had better. I've been doing better in the past. So I guess I should actually probably warn everybody, if you see me wiggling around and sitting really weird, it's because I had an appendectomy last week. Ended up being rushed to the hospital and chop, 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 and out it comes. But the good news is, as it turns out, the appendix is not a necessary organ. Like, they can take it out and you're cool. So everything's fine. Just a little discomfort here. But, what are you going to do?
Well, we're happy you're on the mend, back in action.
Thank you. Thank you. So before we take now, our topic is going to be the fall peanut bunker migration coming out into the rivers and how you can capitalize on it. And this is like a big event on the Chesapeake, right? This is kind of a big deal. Not so much for us personally, so much as because, hey, the fish know about it. They're going to take advantage of it. And if you know about it and treat it the right way, you can take advantage of it and catch more bigger fish. But before we dive into all that, another thing that's becoming really popular right now that's picking up in effectiveness is fishing topwater. And we've had Ian Rubin from Lip Rippers Baits. He's been our intern this fall. And we were having a discussion about some of the topwater lures that he makes. He makes some totally awesome lures that just look phenomenal. Zach, why don't we bring him in and let's let him tell us a little bit about the hooks he uses and why he uses them.
Awesome. Hey, Ian, welcome.
What's up? I sell a bunch of different types of topwater lures. My top ones are probably these poppers, spooks, and then a few different other types of spooks, like different colors, like chrome, and then holographic ones and stuff. Some
Ian,
poppers and stuff.
Hold on. Hold those up again. Hold those up so we can see them side by side. Now, I see some very different hooks right there. What is going on?
So this one, as you can see, what you're used to, your single hook, your treble hooks. And then right here we got inline single hooks. So as you can see, instead of having 3 hook points per hook, you have 1 hook point.
And why do you rig one way versus the other? What's going on?
So, you ever seen this flopped around in a fish's mouth while you're trying to get it out? It's definitely not a scary. It's a bit scary. So I'm sure that a lot of you guys have experienced a hook going through your finger or your hand. It's definitely not a fun experience. I think that it's something that I try to avoid as much as I can. But the best way to limit that, I found, is one, by using single hooks. And really, I mean, the single hooks do a number of things. So besides making sure that you don't get injured or poked while you're doing anything with them, the big thing is they're a lot safer for the fish and definitely help out with the mortality rates once you release the fish. You're not having, instead of having, say, 9 holes in the fish or poking a bunch of different piercings all over, you get 1, maybe 2. So it's a lot easier on the fish. It's a lot easier on you and your hands. And then in addition to that, too, I mean, they're just a lot easier to deal with. And additionally, you get, instead of having 3 prongs right there, you get 1 big prong. So it's going to stay in the fish easier once it's in. Trebles pull out a lot easier. So your singles are going to stay in the fish better once they're in. And also, the big thing is a lot of people question the catch ratio when you're using the inline hooks. But from what I've found, there really isn't a big difference. You might miss a few fish, but really with stripers, I mean, they're aggressive. If they come up trying to hit a bait, they're not going to stop. I mean, if they hit it once and they miss, they're going to come back for it. They're not going to just stop following it all of a sudden. So, I mean, I think that they're great for promoting conservation. I mean, they're great for anglers because, I mean, when you're reaching down trying to get a hook out of a fish's mouth, that's not something you want flopping around. So, I mean, and really, like, there's no need to have 9, 6 hooks on a bait. I mean, you really only need a few. So, I mean, it really just helps out.
I'm going to say, Ian, from what I've seen, and this is just a gut feeling. I don't have any research to back this up, but my gut tells me that you're going to miss like maybe 15, 20% more strikes. Like you miss a lot with trebles anyway on topwater, right?
Yeah.
You have a blow up and they miss it. It does happen more, I think maybe to the tune of 15, 20%, but considering how much less damage it does to the fish, not even recognizing the danger factor you and me, I think it's more than a worthy trade-off. I mean, look, I'm sure lots of folks watching this they've seen it where a fish has actually hit a treble hook and gotten a bottom tine in its bottom jaw and then the 2 tops in the roof of its mouth, and its mouth is literally pinned shut. And it's like you can't get that hook out without mangling the fish. And if that's an undersized fish, then you and me, everybody, we're going to feel bad about it. So it really is, I think, a very good move to go to the singles. I appreciate that you rig your lures like that. And I tell you, all my topwater lures, I've ditched the trebles at this point because it's just it's not worth using them. It really isn't. And special announcement, people. Folks out there who may not have seen your lures, we were just discussing off air a moment ago, there's a way they can get some, right? Because we're about to start our big Fish for a Cure fundraising drive, and you just kindly said you'll pitch in. We'll have some lures that'll be in the mix. Zach, what else do we got going on?
Oh, in our Fish for a Cure fundraiser?
Yeah.
Oh, we got quite a few things. We'll have some Fish Talk swag up for auction. The Dave Gendel's Thomas Point Shoal Book, which Lenny was a contributor for. It's got some fishing intel in there. The Respect the Locals fish shirt, which is inspired by the old fishing boat decals. If you guys remember those. He was actually telling me he was peeling off all the stickers on his dad's old boat. And there was a crab, a Thomas Point Lighthouse. I mean, it was really cool when the DNR used to give out those stickers, and so he was thinking about adding to his collection there. We have tons of great stuff. We have lip rippers lures, some BKD lures, some stuff from Imperium, hand-tied lures from Captain Billy G, some fishing trips with Lenny Rudo up for grabs, a fishing trip with yours truly and Eric Packard. So anyway, stay tuned. We're going to get that started on October 27th. It's going to run for a week, and that's all going to go to our Fish for a Cure campaign. So stay tuned.
October 27th. All right, I'm going to let people know there are a couple other really cool items coming on. There will be a hunting trip, as there was last year, out at Talisman Farm, a guided hunt, which is really, if you've never been to, I mean, most folks probably haven't been to Talisman. It's an incredible place, and the waterfowl hunting is utterly spectacular. I mean, it's second to none. We got sunglasses, hook. We got some hook sunglasses. Look, this is a nice pair of sunglasses right here, people. And this is going to be in the mix right there. I hope I'm not like.
Oh, those are. I think I'm going to bid on those.
I hope I didn't just like.
That's a Maryland-based company, so we have a lot of Maryland-based companies, and that's what's really cool because Fish for a Cure supports the Anne Arundel Medical Center, which is a, Wow,
it's a Maryland facility. Can I just throw in there? They're the ones that got me out of the fire last week. I went to AAMC, and it was actually kind of a shocking experience. It was a crowded emergency room, and they had me back there in about an hour and 10 minutes, and they had me diagnosed in a couple hours, and that night they operated. Boom. So I'm all for supporting AAMC, believe you me.
So your buddy Chris Hardy had a comment, Lenny, and I was thinking it, but I didn't say it. He hopes you saved it for bait.
I asked if I could have it, And the surgeon said, no, it goes directly to pathology.
That's just wrong. You all messed up.
What are you going to do? All right, should we dig into this month's topic here? Should we
Yeah,
get
absolutely.
going?
Absolutely. Oh, but I wanted to add some of my 2 cents earlier on the treble versus singles. Now I started targeting striped bass in the wintertime, and legally, I talked to my local DNR officer, and legally, when you're trolling, even in a kayak, you have to smash your barbs or use barbless hooks. So I started using a lot of my trebles just smashed down, so in the winter, if you're trolling, you can't even use single hooks. You'd have to smash down those barbs. So I've actually noticed I don't think I've ever lost a hookup on those smashed trebles. And I use a combination of the two. But when I actually haven't really been targeting them the last few winters for obvious reasons. Leave them alone, right? So anyway, but I wanted to show you guys. Last month, Lenny gave away a custom lip rippers bait that Ian hand painted, customized for Fish Talk. And I don't know if that's evidence that it catches fish, but there you go. So that's one of Ian's Topwater Spooks designs, and
that's clear evidence. Clear evidence that it catches fish.
And you guys can check out his selection at liprippersbaits.com. So we really appreciate it, Ian. Thanks for coming on. And
welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, let's dive in. Let's get to the slides. And I love this first one. I really do. I really do, because it so shows what is going on right about now out there in the rivers.
All right, I'm going to get out of here, Lanny. So the floor is yours.
All right, put it on up. Let's see it. So the bunker have been growing in the creeks and the rivers all summer long. This is young of the year. They're now about 3-4 inches long, right? And as the water chills down, they push out of the creeks, they push out of the rivers, they move out towards the bay. And this slide, I love it so much because this lure, it's a dead ringer for a peanut bunker. The size is right, the shape is right, everything is right. And this is what the rockfish are looking for. As these peanut bunker migrate out, the rockfish are going to push up towards the rivers, into the rivers. They're going to be hunting these little fish, and they're going to be chewing on them somewhere between 3 and 6 weeks. It's tough to say because every year is a little bit different. I have seen these fall river runs. I've seen them go, I've seen them go a month and a half, and I've seen them go like a week, and then a really hard cold snap just pushes the bunker out and they're gone. That's unusual, but it can happen. But as a general rule of thumb, we're talking about a month. Now, historically, I'd say it's mid-September through mid-October. That's really no longer true last few years. It really hasn't started up until October. And
thanks for tuning in for
can
another
run into November. We got some weird noises going on. I don't know what that is, but we'll ignore it. Zach, can you take us on to slide number 2, please? This will show us another lure that is highly effective as this is going on. Uh-oh. Do we have slide 2? There we go. Can we make that big? We can barely see the lure. Thank you. All right, so here, that's our friend Eric Packard. He's a contributor to Fish Talk, as most of you folks probably know, and a darn good angler. And on this fall day, he chose to put on a bucktail that's dressed with a plastic. And, a bucktail for this fall bunker run is a really good lure. As opposed to going to a straight jig head, it gives you a little more profile, gives a little more bulk to the bait. And these bunker are not long, skinny fish, right? We're not trying to imitate, say, bay anchovies that the fish have been slashing on when we've been mackerel and bluefish and rockfish mixed fishing these last couple of months. This is bunker. They got a very different profile. And a bucktail really does match up with it quite well. Zach, you can go ahead and pop us over the next slide when you can. So also, skirting baits works really well right now. Now, skirts I have mixed feelings about skirts. They absolutely help a lot of the time, but it almost seems like some folks have just, they're like, they can't throw a jig without a skirt on it these days. And I've definitely seen times when the fish want that long, slender profile. The skirt does not help you. It may, in fact, hurt you. But at this time of year, in this scenario, in the river mouths, that skirt really does add that extra profile, perhaps the color contrast at times, but it's definitely a profile thing. Having that extra bulk on your bait just is a really, really good move. This was in the mouth of the Chester. This was not last fall, but the fall before. And the lower Chester, in that big bend it makes right before it hits the bay, that is a really good area to apply the tactics we're talking about right now. But they go across the board: mouth of the Magazine, mouth of the Severn, mouth of the South, mouth of the West, mouth of the Chop Tank. These are all areas where these bunker are going to be pushing out, and this is all going to be highly effective. All right, now go ahead and take us to the next slide, if you would, Zach. And I want everybody to consider these next 3 slides together. These are my boys, David and Max. This is one evening last fall when I was out on my Glacier Bay, and they absconded with my crabbing skiff. I don't know, I guess they didn't want to fish with Dad. They got in the crabbing skiff on their own, and they went right to where I was in the South River. And we were catching some good fish. You can see it was very close to sunrise. And this does illustrate an interesting phenomenon that is not always true. It is absolutely not always true. But there are certain times, particularly early in the run, when the rockfish are going to be there, and you can fish them all day long and just, it's like banging your head against a wall. Nothing's happening. And then 45 minutes before sunset, they light it up. For whatever reason, this absolutely happens sometimes at this time of year. So if you're out and you fished from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock and you're like, yeah, I want to go home and get some dinner, I'm telling you, hang tight. Wait for those last moments of daylight, because there are times when that just totally turns them on. All right, now remember this slide as we go to the next one. And Zach, you can go ahead and take us to the next one anytime here. Oh, no, we skipped one. Oh, we skipped one. We're out of order on the 3 slides in order. Can we jump back one? Or did I mess it up and fail to send it to you or something? Oh, boy.
I'm pretty sure that's the next slide. What, can you tell me what it was?
Molly in a hat, in the puffy hat. There it is.
Oh, wait. Whoa, you see it?
Yep, that's it.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
put up that one next. That's all right.
I'm failing my Wizard of Oz routine here. All right, here we go.
All right, well, this is cool. Everyone can see it now. So now remember what the last, whoop, it went away. There it is. Remember what the last slide shot looked like. And now look at this shot. Look at the background. Look at how Molly's dressed. This is my daughter, Molly. You can see the clothes have bulked up a little bit, right? It's getting a little chillier. Now I'll go ahead to the next one if you would.
All right, sorry about that.
That's okay. I'm sure everyone's going to get the point, because now we see in this shot, now he's really dressed for winter, right? He's got on the hat, he's got on the mittens, he's got the whole bit. And what's really critical to notice here is that in that first shot with the boys, you could see lots of land in the background up close. Second shot with Molly, you saw a little piece of land in the background. Here you don't see any land. What's going on? As it's getting colder and colder, and you can almost match this up. I mean, you can match it up with how everybody's dressed in these pictures. As it's getting colder and colder, the fish are pushing farther and farther out from the river. And when those bunker are completely out of the river, right, they're in the main stem bay, this feeding behavior will still be going on, but you got to follow these fish. If you're deep in the mouth of a river one day, and a week later you go out and you go to the exact same spot and you don't find any fish, you need to tell yourself, okay, it's a week later. We've had 7 more chilly nights. I got to push a little farther out towards the bay. I got to look for the fish a little more towards the mouth of this river, or perhaps outside the mouth of this river. You got to follow these fish because this is going to be a progression. All right, go ahead and take us to the next slide, Zach, if you would. We're going to show the progression.
Are you ready to start fielding some questions? Because
Sure, feel free to pop them in there, man. You can hit
All
me with
right.
questions anytime.
so I got one right here, just kind of relevant to what you're talking about. The fish starting to move out.
What water temp do the bunkers start to move out? Certainly once it's below 70, but I think even in the low 70s, they may begin this. They're not going to leave the rivers at that point, but they will start to leave the creeks. I have been told that the amount of daylight also plays a role in this. So even like we had a really warm spell these last few weeks, we haven't really had many chilly nights, but the bunker are already starting to move around. And part of that may be because, they're attuned not only to temperature, but also to daylight, the length of the days, the shortening days. And that's, part of how they know this migration is going to start going. But certainly once you look on the fish finder and you see 60 something, it's started.
Cool. Are you ready for the next slide?
Absolutely. So here we're looking at, I just grabbed, I opened up the closest chart and grabbed it as an example. This is true for all the rivers. I don't mean to specify the Severn, but this is right at the mouth of the Severn. Now, if I was going out tomorrow, this is the zone that I would be looking at. I'd be looking inside to right in the mouth of the river. I really wouldn't be looking outside the river mouth at this point. Now, I say that after having been landlocked for the last 10 days. Actually, the doctors won't let me on a boat for another week yet. But even right before, I guess it would have been the Wednesday, not this past Wednesday, but the Wednesday before that, we were already seeing the bait starting to push out. Not the rockfish hadn't moved in yet, but the bait was starting to push into the river in the south. Not outside the river at all, not in the river mouth, but they were pushing from the creeks to the rivers. So it's certainly already beginning. And if I were going out tomorrow, this is the kind of zone I'd be looking at. All right, go ahead and take us to the next slide if you would, Zach. We're going to go a week to 2 weeks later in the cycle. Okay. Now I still may be looking right in the river mouth. It depends to some degree on what the weather's been doing. But I'm also going to be patrolling out in the broader area outside the mouth of the river, not really in the main stem bay, but up towards Whitehall Bay, this open area. And this is probably the zone that you'll find these fish in for the longest stretch. If they're in the mouth for a week, they may be out here for 2 weeks before they push on beyond that. Again, might just be a week, the weather dictates. But this is kind of the zone, the area where you're going to have the best possibility for the longest amount of time of finding these fish. All right, Zach, go ahead and take us to the next one if you would. I'm going fishing a week later. Now I'm broadening the search. I'm probably not inside the river mouth itself anymore. Now I'm pushing, again, I'm still looking in the Whitehall zone, right? That area in the mouth of the river. But I'm also starting to look in the periphery of the actual bay itself, where the river's dumping out. Again, it depends on weather, but this is kind of the next stage of the migration. This is the zone you're going to find them in. All right, Zach, go ahead and take us to the next one. And now we're talking, it's a week later. I'm dressing really heavy. Now it's cold out. We're probably pushing into November at this point, but if we have a really cold snap, it could still be October. Now I'm looking in the main stem bay along the edges where it drops off towards the main channels, and it gets harder at this point to find the fish, but you can still find those shoals of bunker. You can still find the rockfish hunting them. And this next slide is going to be the biggest indicator of all. No surprises here, people. It's a bunch of birds, right? When the rock are really chewing on these bunker, the birds are going to be over top of them. Now, I want to dig in a little bit about fishing these birds. Anybody who has been reading my work for years or, read any of my books, that I've always said, do not blast over these birds. When you get within 100 yards, slow it down to a fast idle, like a slow speed zone. Pull around, upwind of the birds, and then shift into neutral and let yourself blow in and just be very slow and deliberate. And that way you won't scare the fish down. Now, I've said this for years. I've practiced it for years. I mean, decades. Times, they are changing. I can't tell you the biological reason why. I've heard it surmised that today's schools are just much smaller than they used to be. I think that's entirely possible, but I don't really know it for a fact. What I do know is the schools don't churn water for an hour anymore. I haven't seen that happen in years. They don't churn water for 15 minutes anymore. I haven't seen that happen in 3, 4, 5 years. These days, most of the time, what you're going to see is these birds are going to pop up, they're going to gather, and by the time you get there, they may well be gone. If not, you'll probably get in 1, 2, maybe 3 casts if you're really lucky, and then they'll break up and they'll pop up somewhere else. The schools are much faster moving these days. They don't stick around whether you run over them or not. Now, if you run over them, certainly you will drive them down. But you can't really plan on them sticking around the way you used to be able to. I remember when I was a kid and you pulled up to a flock of birds, you were like, ooh, yay. And what would go through your head was, will they stick around for 5 minutes or 50 minutes? And you just never knew. Today, 5 minutes is a long time. So I've altered my techniques. I think everyone kind of has to if you really want to be successful. What I do now is the moment I see the birds gather, and I even try and anticipate by watching where the birds are flying and seeing if they're just starting to gather somewhere, I will pour on the coals. I'll head for them at full tilt. When I get about 50 yards away, I'll go from full tilt to dead idle, and then idle in. Maybe a little more, maybe 60 yards away, something like that. Certainly not casting distance, nowhere near casting distance. Say 2, 3 casting distances. I'll pull it right back, and then idle in. And I'll tell you what, there are times when while I'm idling in, they disappear. And there are times when I idle in and get close enough to cast, and you get in, 2, 3, 4 casts. Maybe they'll stick around a little longer. Often they just bust up and disappear again. Whatever. But here's a critical feature. Zach, go ahead and can you pop up the next slide right there next to me, just like you got this one? You see there a bait ball on the meter, right? When I pull in to birds, I usually have other anglers on my boat, and they may start casting when I'm idling. But when I'm pulling in, I'm looking at the meter. That right there is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for rockfish. I'm looking for arches, okay? If I only see that, I'm probably going to keep on idling. I'll go right through where the birds used to be, assuming they've broken up, and then I'll do a big spiral around. And a lot of times what you'll find is you'll see good quality arches on the meter somewhere, 50, 60, 80 yards from where the birds were. Usually it's going to be up current. The rockfish like to feed into the current. So if you got an outgoing tide, favor the north side of where you just saw the birds. Now, when I see the fish on the meter, the quality fish, the rockfish, that's when I'll go into neutral and start casting until everybody casts all around. Often, unlike when you're fishing right in the birds, these fish are going to be at mid-depth. They might be along bottom. Often they're all the way down on bottom, down to like, in the 12 to 20 foot zone. But the meter becomes, I think the meter has become, in this day and age, just as important as the visual indicator of the birds. Because finding, seeing the birds is one thing. Getting there in time to cast to them is another thing. And often that won't happen. And so then you got to use that meter to figure out which way the fish went. And that's yet another thing. Again, remember, rockfish generally, not always, generally are going to be feeding into the current, into the tide. The bait fish are swimming into the tide. Everything's getting chased into the tide. So you don't want to go down current. You might find them down current. I take that back. But you don't want to favor down current. You want to favor up current, make a big loop around, and see if you can spot those fish on the meter, and then really start your casting. Now, I wanted to pop this slide up for another reason too. Sometimes the birds just don't play, right? The rockfish aren't chasing the fish up. You're just not going to see the birds. When that's the case, you can prowl around, look for blobs like that on the meter. This is often going to happen very late in the cycle, November into December. At least in the middle bay zone, you tend to see the bird action start to taper off as it gets really cold out, but you can still find these blobs on the meter. And when you do, go around them, hunt around, work the area. Sometimes you won't see nothing but bait. Sometimes you'll drive around for an hour and see nothing but bait and never throw a jig. Don't throw the jig on this. It's not going to help. You got to see the arches. You got to see the fish hunting around them. But, you find the fish where you find the bait. So if you see a bunch of these blobs, it's worth working that area with the meter and just looking around and searching for a while. Okay, well, that has taken us to our last slide. Zach, I wonder, has anybody else chimed in any questions?
Yeah, we got a couple in there.
Why don't we go ahead and pop them up? And while we're doing so, folks, if you got any questions, just plug them right into the comments. Zach will relay them and we'll get them answered.
All right. Well, this first question came in early in the talk here. And it came from YouTube. So his name is Stephen Gilday. And he wants to know that he lives out of D.C., but runs out of the Road River near you. So which time of day would you choose?
Boy, Stephen, that's a great question. I would choose the afternoon into evening because I hate getting up early. But if you want to talk about pure fishing, just pure catching, your absolute best chances, daybreak is really tough to beat. Now, getting there half an hour after daybreak doesn't cut it. Because then you step on the boat, you go where you're going. By the time you get there, that early morning bite is already kind of petered out. You want to be literally throwing off the lines at the very first peak of light and getting into these areas where the fish are well before the sun is actually hitting the horizon. Now, there will be times, there are times when it's an evening bite. It's impossible to predict, but just generally broad brush speaking, it's probably more often that the sunrise bite is going to be better than the sunset bite. Not always, but just, again, really broad brush. So, again, if you want to get up that early and get to the boat that early, God bless you, go for it. But, if you want to get there in the mid-afternoon and fish that evening bite, great. Now, as far as the tides go, that's really variable, right? It changes. It depends throughout the course of the day. And you can get a midday bite that's awesome based on the tide. Absolute prime situation, just the best of the best of the best, is when you get your peak tide running right at daybreak or right at sunset. And I guess if I didn't mind getting up early and I was coming all the way from DC, I may well check the tide charts and say, oh, there's a great tide right at sunset. I'm going to be there right at sunset. Or there's a great tide right at daybreak. I'm going to be there right at daybreak.
Cool. So then a couple other questions came in now that you've requested them. But let's see, our friend Eric actually let us know. This isn't a question, just a comment, just about what he's observing in the Middle Bay there.
Right on time, right? Mill Creek feeds into the lower Patuxent. That's right on time. It's exactly what I saw last week in the South. They had pushed out of the creeks and were just sort of hitting the river. So that makes absolutely perfect sense.
And the next question kind of follows that. But would this timeline be the same throughout the bay? the Severn River, Mill Creek, Patuxent compared to, say, the Potomac?
Virtually, not exactly. One thing to consider is the Potomac itself is a really big body of water, right? I mean, as far as tributaries go, you know, you got the Susquehanna, you got the Potomac. It's hard to find anything else that can really compare, you know, size and volume wise. So the Potomac may well be a tiny little bit behind as far as where the fish are in relation to the mouth versus farther up the river. Now, I haven't been there, but I would bet my bottom dollar that if you went to the creeks off the Potomac right now, you'd find exactly the same thing. The bunker pushing out of the creeks. They're hitting the river. But the Potomac is a big darn river. They're going to be, you know, it'll take them a longer time to work their way down. And the lower Potomac, where it meets the bay, I mean, shucks, it's almost like the bay up where the south meets the bay, right? So, you know, often in December, you're still going to have peanut bunker in the lower Potomac down near, you know, in the Point Lookout zone, or the Smith Point zone. You're going to have peanut bunker that are there that aren't really like legitimately over the line and into the official bay, but they're kind of basically, you know, sort of the same thing. And they'll be there into December. So, you know, that's a little behind. Now, the Severn is going to be right on target with this. The Chop Tank, the Packs, is, you know, the you know, more common sized tributaries are going to be following the same pattern.
Cool. So from slide number 1, we had a question about the bunker lure, and if memory serves me correct, we saw that at ICAST as the live target menhaden swim bait. I have not used that, Lenny. Do you know if that's a topwater or sinking lure? I think it's more of a swim bait. I think it's a kind of.
It is a swim bait with the weight embedded in the plastic on the hook, you know? So it's, you just put it right on. You don't add any extra weight. I don't know if that one in specific was, you know, a half an ounce or an ounce or whatever. I'm pretty confident you can get those in different weight sizes, right? Is that right? It's got to be.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but it is a swim bait. It's straight up. You just tie it on and go. It's got that paddle tail, so it swims, and that was highly effective. I have other pictures. That actually was Glenn. That's the president of the ASA was holding that fish. He caught that fish, and I actually have like when I was looking for the right one to grab, I probably have 10 different pictures from that day of him holding fish with that lure hanging out of his mouth. It was a killer. It was totally doing the trick. But you know, match the hatch, right? I mean, that thing pretty much perfectly matches the hatch. And there are other options that are very much like that that'll get the job done. Again, you know, the bucktail with a plastic, another really good imitation. And the jig head skirted, something like the BKD, is just another super imitation.
Cool. So our guest tonight, Ian, had some questions that were lore related as well.
No way.
So he says, with the bliss only lasting so long, which lures do you keep tied on at all times, and which situation do you use each in?
So personally, I'm a great fan of a 4-inch or 5-inch paddle tail, white, and I've always got that on. I will skirt it at this point, right? This time of year, that's going to be a white bait with either a chartreuse skirt or a white skirt, or I would use a chartreuse bait with a white skirt. Now there will be, you know, some very low light conditions where I might swap out for a purple, stick that on there, or a dark red, something like that, a root beer. But commonly, that's going to be what's always tied on. Now, actually, you know, if I'm going out at daybreak, that's when I'll tie on that topwater, right? Right at sunrise, and I'll hit riprap with it. It's a different fishery. It's not the fish that are hunting these bunker and open water. But this is also a great time of year to throw the topwater. So I might have one of them on the boat too. Another one I'm probably going to have is a jig head with a skirt with a BKD. It's just plain old effective. I mean, it just really works well sometimes. And what I like about it is that's a quick and easy swap on the colors. It's a quick and easy swap on the contrast, right? You can have a white skirt and a chartreuse tail. You can pull that chartreuse tail off, throw on a pink or whatever, and get that contrast going. It's a just a standby that's kind of always, you know, high on the effective scale. And Zach, I wish you'd ask that question of you, because I got to tell you, people, if you've ever fished with Zach, you know this to be true. Zach generally keeps on the same lure for about 30 seconds. 2-3 casts, he puts on something else. He's just like constantly switching. And that includes right after he catches a fish. So,
You know, I like the pearl white color 4 to 5 inch paddle tail is kind of, you know, my favorite. So,
but you've always got, so because you've often got on the quick clips, right?
you know, I'm kind of getting away from, but I do, you know, yes, I do like those. Yes.
Yeah, and that allows for that instantaneous bait change. You know, it's interesting. I didn't notice this until tonight. I didn't notice when I was looking at the photos. But if you look close at that first slide, you'll see he's actually got that on a swivel clip.
That's a lot more hardware than the quick clip.
Yes.
That's a lot more.
Yes. That is a lot of hardware. It's something normally I would try and kind of avoid that, but this guy knows what he's doing, and clearly it was effective. So hey, don't argue with success, right?
That's right. All right, we got a ton of questions. Let me try to get them into a nice order.
Okay.
All right. All right. Here's a good one from Don Williams. He's looking for more information about targeting depth and what kind of ounce jig heads you're going to be using for jigging.
So I can talk like tackle trolling around these rivers. And I'm going to give credit where credit is due. I watch Jeff Sykes. I look at what he's got on the end of his line when he pulls it in, because he's like the troll master around here. And what I always see is like a 1 ounce bucktail and or jig and a 1/2 ounce on a tandem, or maybe like, you know, a 3/4 and a 1 1/2. Tied in tandem. He's always pulling the tandems. Yeah, he's always pulling the tandems. He loves those tandems, and I've watched him pull in 2 at a time doing that too. It's not unusual to see that happen. So that is a really good rig. When you got a total of say 1 1/2 to 2 1/2 ounces between the two, right, on your total tandem, you're in the right ballpark. If you go shallower, you might want to lighten that up. If you're going deeper, you might want to beef that up. Now, I'm going to throw in one other thing too. One thing that I really like to pull when I'm trolling light tackle, and I will do it on occasion, is a 3/4 ounce rattle trap, silver and blue. Don't forget to change the trebles to singles. But that lure sometimes, man, you pull that thing through the water, it's like the fish can't help it. They just got to jump onto it. That's a highly effective one. It's a really good one. A red and white Miro lure, 4 or 5 inches, lipped plug. That's also a really good one to throw back there when the fish are high in the water column. That one only dives to about 2 feet. It's just got that little swimming lip. But when the fish are high in the water column, that one's a killer too. So, and I got to say, a lot of guys have a lot of success trolling the river mouths at this time of year, doing just this kind of stuff we're talking about. And they'll just do a big circle, right, or through the channel edges in the river mouth. As soon as that depth finder comes up under, say, 8-10 feet, they turn. They keep that depth in that 10 to 20 foot zone, and they do really well with it. It's very effective.
All right, here's an interesting question for bait fishing. And can you legally snag a bunker for bait?
Yeah, I believe so. In fact, you can get, we used to call them bunker snaggers. I don't know if that's a real name. They're basically a big treble hook about yay big around that has a piece of lead, that flexible lead that's wrapped around the shank. And there was a time, I haven't done it in recent years. I think I do still have a bunker snagger on the boat. But there was a time when I would go out, and that would be my main method. I would have live lining rigs set up. You got to have them ready, because when you snag a bunker, you can't stick it in a live well. It won't live. I mean, it'll live like 5 minutes. Once you snag it, you're kind of crushing it. But you can snag it, pull it right off the hook, put a hook right through its nose, and flip it right back over the side. And that is a very effective method. It does work really, really well. The other thing you can do is get a cast net. And you can throw a cast net on the bunker. Now, you can do it now. You can do it until they push out into the 15 to 20 foot zone. Then it gets kind of sketchy trying to get them in a cast net. You end up throwing the net more than anything else. But while they're still in relatively shallow water, say less than 10 feet, you can throw an 8 or a 10 foot cast net. 6 footer really kind of doesn't cut it. I mean, sometimes you can get them, but it's not highly effective. But if you can throw an 8 or 10 foot cast net, and you can spot some bunker, flip it on the surface, and creep the boat up, and then just pitch it right over top of them. You can fill your live well in one throw. You can put, often if you get them good, you got too many. You'll be shoveling them over the side, and you'll put 30 in the live well. That is officially rockfish candy. There's nothing better. They just can't not eat it. Oh, yeah, we got a feature on this. Thank you, Zach. I'm glad you remembered. We got a feature on that whole gig, how you can make it happen. Just go to fishtalkmag.com. You can use this link right here, or if you type bunker into the search box, I'm sure that'll bring it right up. And it is a very, very effective method of fishing at this time of year. It is. I haven't done it in a couple of years because I guess I just haven't felt like I've had to. But when the bite's gotten really tough, the fishes haven't been coming up and churning the surface, or we've had those situations where they only bite in the last 45 minutes of light, and dang it, I can't fish then because I got this, that, or the other thing going on. I got to fish earlier, and I want to, kind of up the ante on catching the fish. That's something to fall back on right there, because that'll kind of make it happen. When pitching a jig, just won't be doing it. I gotta say, just for the record, I can think of at least a couple occasions where I've had very inexperienced anglers on the boat, and I haven't had them throwing jigs because I knew it would just be a mess. And instead, I got some peanut bunker, threw a cast net on them, filled the live well, took them out, and then set them up to live line the bunker while I'm throwing jig. And I gotta say, more than once, I haven't had a darn bite on the jig, and I've watched them catch fish after fish. That it can be that effective. So Dan's saying, often I find what appears to be stripers on the bottom that don't seem to take a jig. Is it worth trying to drop bait when they seem to want to lay on bottom? Yeah, it is hard to leave good marks. So I'd say a couple things. The first thing I'd say is, if you have live bait, yes. If you have dead bait, it's probably not going to make a big difference. If you got live spot, you're still around, or if you got live peanut bunker, yeah, give that a shot for sure. The other thing I would want to go back on is the style of jigging you're using. If it's vertical jigging, I'd say go horizontal, because a lot of times you will go right over fish right on bottom. And if you're jigging vertically, they just don't seem to want it. If you're casting out and bouncing it along the bottom, they'll slam it. And it takes a kind of a fine touch to do that and keep that jig bouncing right along the bottom without letting it sit for a fraction of a second. It can't sit. As soon as that thing sits on bottom for a half a second, the fish is going, that ain't real, and leaving. So it's got to be a steady ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. It's got to be moving over the bottom, just touching down. That snap up is very important. A slow pull up, the fish is probably looking at that and going, that ain't real. You really want to snap that thing up and then let it fall back towards the bottom. Absolute minimum tension on the line, but you got to maintain minimum tension, and letting it sink as naturally as possible. And then the moment it ticks down, boom, up again. The many, many times, more than I can count, I've had marks on bottom, And I've watched specific anglers on the boat, we shall not name names, catch fish after fish, while other specific anglers on the boat have not caught any fish. Same exact gear, right? It really came down to the style of the jigging and popping it off the bottom just so, and making it just ping, ping, ping right along on bottom without ever sitting there. Can have a dramatic effect. Dramatic.
You don't have to talk about me. I'm right here. Okay.
No, you're good. I know you're good. I've got the pictures to prove it. But I have, I have had plenty of times when there have been, 4 people on the boat and 2 people caught, a dozen beautiful fish, and maybe one other person caught 1 fish and the other caught none. I mean, it happens. And that's often the situation where you see that in. When they're locked on bottom, they're just sitting there. So have we got any more questions, Zach, or have we gone through the list here?
We've got quite a few. I'm just trying to. I try
Oh,
to work them in so we can tackle them.
Yeah.
In order of relevance. So David has an interesting question here. For this time of year, how would you rank time of day, current velocity, and phase of the tide in order of importance?
Woo! And you answered as I was typing. I think that was hearkening back to our earlier
yes,
conversation on time of day. And yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Although I want to throw in one thing here, because David mentions current velocity, which I really didn't get into, right? I got into more of the timing. And in terms of importance, I actually think it ranks kind of low, because regardless of what the velocity is, if you're in the right tidal period, you got a real good shot. But one thing that I've noticed that I think is really interesting and that might help folks catch more fish is that when that tide is really roaring and the fish come up, they seem to be, the bigger fish seem to be farther off the birds. Have you ever noticed this, Zach? You were there one day. You were there one day for this. You, me, and Eric were all fishing with someone else late in the fall. The birds were working 100 yards away, and we were catching the heck out of fish. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And when we went up to where the birds were, we really didn't catch fish. But then you got like 100 yards away going up current from those fish, and that was where you caught the fish. Or 100 yards up from where the birds were. That was where we caught the fish. And that was like a really extreme example, because I remember we fished hard and we caught a lot of fish, and like none of them were under the birds. They were all way up from the birds. But I've seen other times like that where that current's just rolling along, and the good fish, they're way up current of where you're finding the birds. It's weird.
Mm-hmm. All right, a couple interesting questions too. First off, I'll kind of throw these up one after the other. David asks, are stripers the only fish to target this time of year?
Well, that depends entirely on where you are, and I'm definitely not going to say yes. I mean, for one thing, there's still blues around. Well, I haven't been out in a week. From what I hear, there are still blues around in the Middle Bay zone as well as in the Lower Bay. Lower Bay, Tangier, you're going to have specks on board should be for another month. I mean, we'll have to see. But last year they were clear into mid-November. Any trout under the fish this year? There could be. I've heard about a couple weak fish being caught this season. I haven't experienced it myself, but I haven't gone for them. And like I said, I've been out for a week. But historically, 20 years ago, we'd be catching weak fish right now like crazy. I mean, that would be a main target. There are still being flounder being caught, small ones in some of the areas a little farther south from here, from the Middle Bay zone. Redfish are going to be around in the Tangier, Lower Potomac, those zones. The Rappahannock, the Piankatank. The Piankatank, I haven't been down there, and I don't have any direct knowledge of this, but the Piankatank should be on fire for specks and reds right now. And they should be getting a lot of small rockfish mixed in, or I say small, slot rockfish mixed in. That should all be happening right now. So there is a lot of different stuff. Now, one thing that I can't wait to try, and I will be trying this soon, is I want to go out to some of the deeper structure and look for sea bass. People may remember that last year, keeper-sized sea bass were being caught on structure in 30, 40 feet of water in the middle bay and in the lower bay. I don't know anybody who's tried it yet this year, and it was late in the year last year that this happened. It was November. But I did hear this week of some sea bass being caught at the Bay Bridge. So that gives me some hope. And I'm very excited to try that. I'd like to see if there's some sea bass as well coming on this year. Could be really cool, right? I mean,
very cool.
Love to have a sea bass fishery.
So I saw John Bale, Fish Talk contributor, drove 2 hours to the lower bay the other day, got some specks and reds on his kayak, so that's pretty cool.
Nice, nice.
How about the upper bay, Lenny? I did fill in for reports last week, and Herb said the flats are, the striper bite has been picking up there, but
we know what else is there, right?
We do.
Big catfish. Catfish aplenty.
So on YouTube, Chesapeake Bay Outdoors asked about, north of Chesapeake, like Elk River, Bohemia River.
So like you were just saying, I mean, yeah, there are. I think the flats was one of the highlights from last week, wasn't it?
Yep.
And that's a lot of throwbacks, but there are keepers in the mix. So I know that also eelers at pools have caught some rockfish, but they're catching like really big catfish, 30, 40-pound catfish, dropping eels on the lumps at pools. What else have we heard from way north up there? It's funny. We haven't heard about any snakeheads for a while, and we were hearing about tons of them earlier on. The lower Susquehanna, the Gunpowder, all those areas, the Bohemia, but we haven't heard about that for a little while. I guess maybe the chills in the air.
Sorry, trying to figure out which questions we haven't fielded.
While you're throwing up the next one, I'm just going to say I remember many, many, many years ago. I'm going back 20 years. Those areas were like hotter than the lower bay. We all think about Point Lookout now as being the place to go really late in the season. And, it has been. But, man, I remember there was a time when, like, the Bay Bridge was the hot place to go. When, in December, when Pools was the hot place to go. When going even farther up, towards the mouth of the C&D Canal, Turkey Point, that zone held big fish. Guys used to troll umbrella rigs on bottom. They would weight them down with like 30 ounces of lead, and they would pick up big fish a long time ago. But you never know. We'll see what happens next year. Some of the tagging studies that they've done to trace the rockfish's migration route have now proven that there is a certain segment of the population that does come through the C&D Canal of the big fish. So you never know when they're going to show up, right? I mean, it could happen.
Couple comments came in light of species diversity. A few reports here. Vincent said he caught a few blues yesterday in Easter Bay off Turkey Point.
Oh, very nice.
Eric Packard says his friend was caught catching sea bass off PLO. So yeah.
So we actually had one report from Chris, who owns the Pearl, which is the Smith Island Fish Resort. Very cool place, by the way. My wife and I went down there a few weeks ago. Gosh, it was a lot of weeks ago now. But anyway, one of the folks who was staying at the Pearl actually caught a tautog right there at Smith Island, a tog. And that was the second one we heard about. We had, oh God, Ghost Drag guy. Help me out, Zach.
Todd Clayton.
Todd, thank you. he sent us a picture of a keeper tog he caught fishing right outside of Point Lookout, like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago. So I mean, there's more diversity out there right now than you might imagine. It's pretty cool.
Definitely. I'm sorry. I found the other bouncing back to the Upper Bay. I found another comment from Fred Wallace that I meant to tie in with the Elk Bohemia. So he's looking for tactics around the Susky Flats because he's not seeing a lot of surface bait. So what would you do with that?
If it's not, I mean, working topwater, of course, is historically a top method. But if it's not happening up top, I would go right to the jig, the 5-inch weight paddle tail, the BKD, and put it on like a ½ an ounce and start working the channel edges. Right, the whole channel that works down along the west side, and then up north and around to the right. Those areas. Many years ago, they used to be good. I can't tell you that I've fished them. I haven't fished them in a decade or more, and I know other guys have told me that, gosh, from 10 years ago to 5 years ago, those areas weren't as good. But if it's not happening right up on the flats, that's what I would shift to. I would go to the jig. I'd look for slightly deeper water, and maybe work back up, into the Susquehanna a little bit. There's a lot of life going back up. There's a lot more contour, a lot more structure to work with. So maybe that would be the move. I wish I could be more help, but I just have not fished that specific area recently, and I just can't be too much help right there right now. Sorry, Fred.
All right, we got a few more, so we'll try to get through. Is supper ready yet? I mean, we got time, Lenny?
It's more a matter of how long can I stand to sit here in one position. Right. But we'll keep plug them in, man. We're gonna keep going.
Our buddy Stan. So Stan says, if you see hundreds of birds sitting on the water but not flying as you pass by, you see thousands of bunker. What's going on?
Well, hard question to answer as to what's going on. I can tell you one thing. If I've done 2, 3, 4 passes around that with my meter and haven't seen any good fish on it, I'm just going to leave. Because every now and again, you will see that kind of situation where the bait's there, the birds are hanging out, but nothing's happening. And you know what? If you sit there all day, it may turn on, or it may not. That's the kind of spot I'll usually keep in my head as I keep going. And then a few hours later, on my way home, check it out again. I can't tell you exactly what's going on, though. Other than, the fish might just not be activated. They aren't always eating. That's just the way it is. I'm going to fall back on wise words spoken by Pete Dahlberg. I love this quote. And if you ask him, he'll tell you the same thing. You ask him, how do you catch so many fish? His answer is, I burn a lot of gas. And that's part of it. When you're in an area that looks full of life, but you're just not catching fish, some people have the patience to just sit there. I do not. I go right back to burning more gas. Let's start running again.
I was just going to bring up Captain Pete because we had another question, and I know you fished on his boat, and when he's not burning gas, he's using another kind of motor. So,
yes,
does the stealth approach of a trolling motor work as advertised when you're casting and jigging?
Okay, so phenomenal question, Jesse. I have recorded it underwater. I did 2-stroke outboard, 4-stroke outboard, inboard stern drive, electric trolling motor, and then just for yucks, we also did a push pole on sand and in mud, just to see, if everything was as stealth as everybody says it is. So here's the deal. Electric trolling motor, is it as advertised? Pretty much, but sort of not entirely, because same with a 4-stroke. 4 strokes and electrics are pretty much dead silent above the water line. But below the water line, what you hear is prop noise. it's just the turning propeller makes this whirring noise. It's like a wee, 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 wee. And it is directly relevant to how fast it's turning. So now you have a lot more control with that electric than you do with an outboard. So like a 4-stroke, if you're moving at idle, it's making very little noise. The electric trolling motor, you're moving slowly, it's making very little noise. Either one of them, if you juice it all the way up, you take a 36-volt trolling motor and kick it into high gear and really pour it on, that makes some noise. That propeller, not the motor, but the propeller makes that wee, 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 and it just gets louder and louder and louder as the motor goes faster and faster and faster. So if you're using the electric, just tone it down, keep the speed slow, and you're pretty dang stealth. You can't beat it. I mean, just for the record, when we did the push-pull in sand, it was actually louder than an electric trolling motor. When we did the push-pull in mud, the push-pull kept getting stuck, and we eventually said, okay, you can't really use a push-pull in mud, I guess, anyway. The 2-stroke was hopeless. Tons of noise. Particularly in neutral, which is kind of shocking. It makes more noise in neutral than it does in gear. In gear at idle, it wasn't like so horrible, but in neutral, it's just rattling and clanging and banging and making all kinds of noises. And once you speed up, it's just chang, cha-chang, pop, pop, pop. It makes a ton of noise. And the inboard and the stern drive weren't horrible, but they were actually worse than the 4-stroke outboard. 4-stroke outboard was shockingly, surprisingly quiet. So that's what we found. I do believe that we have an article detailing the sound levels on Fish Talk. Do we, Zach? I think so. I'm not 1,000% sure. But if you Google Lenny Rudo engine noise, you'll find material that lists out the specific decibel levels. We actually we used a underwater microphone, a hydrophone, and we dropped it down. We tried it at like 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet. And we interfaced it with a dBA meter to take the actual sound level readings. So it was very interesting results. Oh, wait, one other thing. I almost forgot. The other thing about an electric trolling motor is you can press spot lock, right, with a Minn Kota, and just hover there. And there are some modern outboard systems that have similar virtual anchoring systems. Yamaha's Helmmaster does it, but they all cost like $35,000 and usually require multiple outboards, and not everybody's going to have them on their boat. The electric trolling motor, that is another monster advantage. You can just press the button, you're going to stay right there.
A couple more bouncing in here. Chris is still tuned in. He's looking for some intel down his way in Herring Bay.
Hey, Chris. So Deal Herring Bay, that's an interesting one to pick out because you get some bunker pushing out of the creek there, but it's not like a big tributary, right? You're just not going to have the sheer number of bunker moving down that little creek that you're going to have in, say, the Severn or the South or, the Packs or whatever. However, what's going to happen is, as we get later and later into the season, and these fish that have pushed out of the tributary start sliding south along that edge where it drops from like 15 feet to like 30 feet from Herring Bay all the way, that edge goes north-south everywhere. That edge is going to become really hot. It's often, I want to say around the first week in November that usually happens, but again, it's weather dependent. Could be next week, could be in a month. It's hard to say. But that edge, it seems like the bunker that pour out of the Western Shore tributaries just slide right down that edge as it gets colder and colder and colder. I'd be looking at that to be really, really good. Now, if I was going out of there tomorrow, unless I saw something really special, honestly, I'd probably be shooting right across to the Chop Tank. Chop Tank is a very lively river, supports a ton of life. There's going to be a lot of baby bunker pouring out of that river over the next month. I can't imagine what the numbers are like, but a lot of baby bunker. And they're going to be rockfish on them. Like there's no guarantees in fishing, but that's as closest to a guarantee as you can get.
How about on the Chester? Matt's doing a little crabbing this weekend and wants to keep a rock to go with his crab.
Oh yeah, the Chester's very good for this. Very, very good. And you can almost like in miniature track this migration down the Chester because the lower river is pretty broad and big and the creeks are more up, and you can almost watch the same thing happen earlier through the river. You know, I have not, again, I haven't fished in a week and I wasn't there the week before. I can't say exactly what's going on there right now. I would expect to find bunker already, probably, you know, maybe 2-3 miles north of Kent Narrows-ish, down to the horseshoe end of the mouth. And as time progresses, that horseshoe and that mouth are just going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. They're going to get better and better and better. I don't know where you're going to run the trot line. Oh, wait. I think it says north, not far from the Corsica. Okay. So you got a definite shot. That far up, you're probably a little less likely to see birds at this point, but it could happen. But the Chester is a fabulous fall river for this exact kind of fishery. And you got a definite shot of finding those fish. By the way, when you fill up your bushel basket, just send me a PM. I'll be happy to help you dispose of all those nasty Chester River crabs that really aren't very good to eat. Anytime.
Lenny, I'm a 6 crab guy. How many crabs do you eat in a sitting?
In a sitting?
Yeah.
Well, usually just 3 or 4, but I like to eat them every day.
Okay.
Every night. I just sit there and munch on them. I only got about 4 left down there. Of course, I couldn't crab in the last 10 days, but fortunately, one of my boys went out for me and caught a bunch of crabs. So I've still got a supply. It's running out now, but.
Excellent. Bouncing back to the audio questions, David actually asked about the thunk of your outboard versus the steady drone of your electric.
It's another fantastic question that's right on point. It's way worse. Now, Yamaha makes what they call the shift dampening system, which is a rubber bushing that stops that thunk. I have not recorded that, and I can't speak to that. Setting that aside from the equation, when you watch the sound meter and you were putting along or just sitting there out of gear, and then you shifted in and then started putting along, it was like this. Boom, 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 boom. So it made a spike. Horrifically loud. Shifting into reverse was often worse than shifting into forward. And I don't know if that's because there's forward motion of the boat, and then when you shift into reverse, it puts more stress on it. I don't know how the transmissions are built. I can't speak to that. But that was very evident. This is why I often tell people, like I've seen people pull up to the lobster balls of the canyons, and they pull up quickly, and then they shift into reverse to stop. And I've literally watched the fish scatter when they shifted into reverse. I mean, it is just perfectly clear. Shifting is bad, B-A-D, bad. Similarly, cranking the motor does the same thing, because when you turn the key, it engages the starter, right? It's metal on metal. that makes that spike in sound really, really bad. This is why I've got 4 strokes. I don't have 2 strokes. I don't shut off my motors pretty much ever. When they're idling, they make 0 noise underwater. Like you can't hear them. Okay, you can hear them. You know what you hear? You hear the telltale dribbling onto the water surface. And you can hear it with the hydrophone like 3 feet down. Put it much farther away, you don't even really hear it. You don't hear the engine idling. But if you shut it off and then you start it, yeah, you hear that metal on metal. Now again, that's a modern 2-stroke. I'm sorry, a modern 4-stroke. Not a 2-stroke. 2-stroke, whole different ballgame. Other types of engines, whole different ballgame. And honestly, I can't even swear this true about Yamahas or Evinrudes or Mercuries. I don't know. I listen with the hydrophone to my Suzukis. And I can guarantee you, when they're idling in neutral, there's no noise. There's no noise. Everybody gets all freaked out about the running motor all the time. It's like, no, if you turn it off, when you turn it on again, you're going to scare anything around you. And it doesn't make any noise underwater. You know, and by the way, you and me talking, standing on the deck of the boat, drowns out all these noises, okay? Because we're talking loud enough to overcome the engine noise, and guess what? Our voices are going right through the water. That was very apparent. We heard it in the hydrophone constantly. When you started talking, you heard human voices. It sounded like the Peanuts cartoons. Wah, 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 wah. Clear as day. Drop a tackle box on the deck, way louder than anything a 4-stroke motor will ever do. Drop a lead weight on a deck, same deal. So all these other noises, I think, take the blame a lot of the time. But shifting in and out of gear, absolutely. That's a big one. Ooh, well, we're pushing the time frame, Zach. How many more questions we got here? Not that I mind. I'll keep going. Oh, I lost it. There was one up there quick, then it was gone. Is the Patapsco the same? Yeah, Patapsco is the same. Absolutely, absolutely. You'll see them moving right down that river too, no doubt.
Cool.
Yeah, haven't gone up there and done it in a long time, but that's, you know, I grew up in Baltimore. That's absolutely
Awesome. Yeah, sorry, I was muted, but for a second there. Yes. So I think pretty much a lot of information. I think that was great.
all right. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed it. Before we sign off, Zach, let's give a final reminder on Fish for a Cure. Right? We told everybody earlier we're doing our fundraiser October. What was it again? Through what was it?
We're gonna do. We'll have a silent auction that begins on Wednesday, October 27th. It's going to run for 1 week through November 3rd.
Excellent.
We're going to
We'll have all kinds of cool gear, boat gear, fishing gear, tackle, clothing, sunglasses, hunting trips, fishing trips, including with me. All kinds of stuff people can get, and every penny that you spend on getting this stuff is going to a really good cause. It just can't be beat. If there's anyone sitting out there right now who is kind of on the fence, do I want to even join the Fish for a Cure tournament and be in it? Let me tell you, you do. Couple reasons. Again, first off, you can't find a better cause. I mean, you're helping people who are suffering from cancer. Come on, folks. I mean, come on. Second reason, you have a free pass. Nobody will criticize you for going fishing on November 6th, period, because you're fishing and fishing for a cure. So you get a free pass. Third reason, and I know Zach will back me on this, the party pack is awesome.
Yeah, they had lobster last year, right?
You remember that? It was incredible.
Lenny, look, PYY just jumped us. We're 10th.
Oh no!
Captain Steve Wagner just jumped. They have 3 boats this year too. Isn't that a
They're
that's
doing great. You know what? That's I hate that they jumped us, but more power to them. That's awesome.
but they're doing great. And the other captain Steve is in 12th place. So PYY is in 9th and 12th, which oh my gosh, PYY 6th.
Ah, they're
Like
rocking
their
it.
3 teams are in the top 12. That's amazing.
They are rocking it. Well, they are going to deserve that lobster. I think there was also shrimp. Wasn't there also gigantic shrimp?
I think it was Ken's Creative Kitchen or something that catered. So we'll see. Hopefully we get that again this year.
It was fabulous last year. I know that. It was like the best boat lunch I've had in my entire life. And there was so much of it. It was like everybody got all they could eat. I mean, it was just amazing.
So Lenny, last year we targeted invasive species. They don't look like they have that category this year. So are we going to go for slam? Are we going to go for the catch and release? We're going to go for perch. We're going to go for the big rockfish. What are we going to do?
I don't know. We're going to have to see. I can't give away our strategy.
We're going to do
it. Last year was a banner year for us. We won invasive species and we won the slam category. So that was all like we pre-strategized that out and it worked out. So I'm not giving away our strategy for this year. It's going to be all different, all new.
So everybody, if you're on the fence on participating in this tournament, it's a charity tournament. It's a ton of fun. It's great fishing camaraderie. Some of the best anglers are out there, and you get a lot back. You get a great lunch, I mean, it's fun and the prizes are awesome, and it all goes to a great cause. Visit fishforcure.org, learn more about it. You still have about 3 weeks to participate in fundraising, and then you can also just participate in the tournament. So, we hope to see you out there.
Yeah, now's the time. Jump on now.
Cool. Well, Lenny, it's great to see you. I can't wait to fish with you again. I know you got a few more weeks of till your boat cleared, and
yeah,
I was able to, we got boat show going on, so I haven't fished much since we've been out, and I just hit my pier. I got a few perch last night, a little dinky rock too. So the peanut bunker are booming in my creek, and I live just a few miles from Thomas Point, so they're in there and they're just busting all night at sunset. So
nice.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, thank you, Zach. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see. We'll have a Fish for a Cure recap. Second Thursday, November 11th. So I guess we'll see you guys then.
Sounds great.
Check out our weekly fishing reports. All our local intel is there. All right. See ya.